The man, the myth, the legend, the OG. In fact, this is the OG.
Yeah.
This is Lakeside Drive. I'm James. It's great to have you at your company wherever you're listening in the off-season.
Hello.
And I'm joined, the focus of today's episode, by my friend and yours, Thomas J. Camp. G'day, mate.
How are you, buddy? You well?
Mate, I'm good. I feel a little bit more relaxed and rested now after a couple of weeks off. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty big season, but look, we'll talk about the season in a little bit. First of all, I want to have a look at the little collection of things that we've got on the table in front of us. So talk us through what you've got left to right.
Well, I've got my $300,000 Danny Rick replica helmet sitting there, so it's pretty well themed. I've got my Lemmy Kilmister little doll. He's a bit of an idol of mine, I suppose. It's good. And then I've got the old Thunderbird too.
So good,
cast iron with the little Thunderbird 4 in the what would you call it?
The little hold there,
the little
I guess.
holder. So yeah, I was obsessed with that show as a kid. Used to get up at 6 a.m. with my dad and watch it and fall asleep and not remember it. But when you could record on VHS tapes back in the day, that's what we did.
It wasn't too frequent, but I often heard people had friends had accidentally taped over like their parents' wedding video or like christening or some other random thing that would happen. You can't do that anymore, but I feel like the risk that you had putting a blank VHS in and thinking, if I don't press record on Rage now, I'm never going to see this video clip again in my life.
Yeah, well, my dad used to host a TV show in New Zealand back in the day.
Did he?
It's like a Sunday night, like semi-churchy, not churchy, like music show called Sing Out. And Dad used to wear this god-awful green and purple suits. Anyway, one day I taped over the last remaining image of that.
I'm sure he's not actually unhappy about that.
No, he's not. Oh, it was a doozy. So anyway.
Mate, it's great to be here at your place. Thank you for having me over.
I am looking very comfortable at the moment.
As you should.
I've got my slippers on.
It's very good.
Got my shorts. My jocks are hanging out the bottom of the shorts.
Outstanding. I can also see to your left a couple of records. I can see Audio Slave popping out there is the record. I can see them. My eyes, Jeff Buckley.
Yeah.
Eyes are not as good as they used to be.
We got some Rage.
Some solid
lots
albums
of Noel
here.
Gallagher. What else we got there? There's some Carnival in there. Yeah.
Feels like
Nirvana.
that's
Some of the AC/DC Back in Black.
classic. There's probably about, 20 records there.
Yeah.
I reckon all 20 would be absolute fire. You're the kind of person that just knows music.
Well, not
I think
according to
you
some
are.
people, but
They're wrong. This is the beauty about having a podcast.
Yeah.
Mate, what I wanted to do is, if you're brand new to the podcast, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. It is the off-season, of course. F1 is finished for the year. We're looking ahead to next year. But between now and then, a couple of special episodes. We'll eventually do a full season review episode. But what I wanted to do is introduce you and us. And if you've been here from the beginning, which is congratulations to you, honestly.
yeah.
Or if you're brand new here, I want to introduce Campy because Lakeside Drive wouldn't be Lakeside Drive without him. It was originally Oz F1. We'll get into the story about the podcast, but I want a little bit of a background on you, Campy. Talk to us about not your whole life, but let's sort of focus a little bit on motor. Otherwise, we'll be here for years.
Yeah.
Let's focus a little bit on the motorsport side of things. Your dad, obviously, you've got Kiwi heritage.
Yeah.
So you'd be pretty happy with Shane Van Gisbergen winning V8 Supercars. To be honest, it's been New Zealand domination for the last couple of years.
Yeah, with Scotty McLaughlin too. So, yeah, it's been good. I used to be obsessed with V8s when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The Mark Scaife HRT era got into it just before that domination period. And then, he just went on a tear for about, 3 or 4 seasons. And my best friend's mum used to be the editor of the V8X magazine back in the day.
Really?
So, there's another guy called Big Head Nev. That's his nickname. Anyway, he so any Melbourne events, so Phillip Island, Sandown, things like that. We used to get passes that basically got us everywhere we wanted to go, and we were just running around as 15, 16-year-olds, just, getting photos with the grid girls back then when it was a thing, and crazy opportunities, some of the things that happen when you're young like that. We just used to walk in the media tent, just eat all the food we could, steal beers and stuff. It was awesome. So, yeah, it was good. But, that was when I was into V8s, but not so much these days.
So talk to us about your motorsport journey then. Was V8s like the thing because it was on at a reasonable time, and back in the day you could watch it on Channel 10 without having to pay for viewership?
Not really. It was just on. I was always into motorsport as a kid. I saw crusty Demons of Dirt when I was in prep, believe it or not. And from then, that day on, everything was dirt bikes and motorcycles, and Mum and Dad weren't too sure how to take it. And anyway, finally got me a bike after about 5 years of nagging. Finally got the bike, and I was way too big for it. But anyway, we got what was known as a CR85 big wheel back then, sort of like a Super Mini these days. And I rode the absolute arse out of that thing at some tracks and used to tear around on school holidays and stuff up the street, up and down the train lines of Somerville. So that was really the passion, mate. Motorbikes was all it was. And eventually, that motorsport and the music and all the whole lifestyle that went with that, that crusty motorbikes thing. I was always more into the racing side of it than I was the freestyle, but that whole X Games, extreme sports, stuff like that, that was the culture that I grew up in, and the music was a big part of it, and the way you dressed and the way you talked. So, yeah, I just frothed that stuff. As you get older, you grow out of it a bit, but still probably that was the foundational stuff. So V8s was sort of the next progressing thing, and anyway, from there, discovered F1 really. It was the Mark Webber. I mean, it's so easy for us in Australia. We're a sporting nation. There's so many sports, and it's professional sports all the time. And heaps of professional leagues, particularly in Melbourne. We're probably the sporting capital. We are the sporting capital of the world. Some of the events we have, like the Grand Prix, tennis and things like that, you're always just surrounded by it. So, yeah, what was I trying to say? Anyway, when Mark Webber started to drive, I knew about him. But when he came out and said, I'm finally in a car to win it, that piqued up my interest. And that was 2009, so that was the Brawn year. And we'd always sort of kept in touch with it. Grand Prix time, you watch it every year and that's it. But, once that happened, it sort of just ignited a real passion and love for the sport. Probably not so much the glitz and glamour of it, but more the on-track, just the spectacle of the cars, the sounds, the technology. And I'd probably say I've got a quite inquisitive mind when it comes to design philosophies and stuff like that. Hello, Kat. This is Clancy, or better known as arsehole in our household. So,
make yourself at home, Clancy.
Yeah.
It is your home.
So anyway, that's the journey with Formula One anyway. And then we started hanging out, and here we are 10 years later.
Were you a Schumacher Ferrari fan or a Hakkinen McLaren fan?
No, I hated Ferrari.
Such an Australian. I'm pretty sure every Australian I've asked, they're all like, no, Hakkinen, or basically whoever else it was, Williams or McLaren.
Yeah, I think we back an underdog, right? We hate someone, we love them on the way to the top, but as soon as they're at the top and they say something stupid, well, it's all over. You are cut down back to your humble beginnings pretty quickly, which it's a part of our psyche. I don't love it all the time, but I think it does. The heart of it's to keep people humble and don't get a big head. Don't be up here. So, I like some of it, but I don't like others. I participate in it a hell of a lot, as you guys would know. So, anyway, yeah.
So, Mike Webber, I mean, that's an easy in for a lot of us because F1 was that domination of Schumacher for a long time. I know a lot of people switched off. I switched off of F1 with the domination of Hamilton early on there around, I think Rosberg maybe piqued my interest a little bit to come back in 2017 after he won the title. And so that's when I started watching again. But that So I vividly remember I was my first year at the Defence Force Academy, 2009, and I don't know, like we'd spend a whole bunch of time outfield and do all sorts of stuff. So I couldn't watch, for the first time ever, I couldn't watch a full season of anything. So it was always highlights. And I remember always wanting to watch highlights, which for sports really difficult to get into that rhythm, just to see where Mark was because of exactly what you said, because he was like, I got a car to win this thing. And boy, oh boy.
And he went deep in 2010. He went to the last race and, should have won it. On his day, he said it himself, the greats go for 2, 3 and 4. On his day, he competed with the best of the best of the sport.
Yeah.
Seb
Vettel even said it in one of his sort of outgoing videos the last couple of weeks. Is like, Mark was phenomenal. On his day when he had everything together, he was just unstoppable.
Yeah, and he did it the hard way too.
Yeah.
His story, just to get into the
He's
sport,
a Canberra milk kid.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know. But if you're from Canberra, New South Wales, you'd be like, I'm a Canberra milk kid. Legitimately a Mark Webber ad.
Really?
With him doing that.
Yeah, he did it the hard way, and we love that.
Yeah.
He got a bit of shit in Australian media for a long time on his way up the Formula One grid, but I never really got it. I don't really know why.
Media love a clickbait.
Well, it's just a misunderstanding of how the sport actually works.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway.
It's one of those things, isn't it, Formula One, that was kind of like plenty of people would watch it. And, of course, when it went Adelaide to Melbourne, there was a massive what? I think that happened with 96.
Good old Kennett brought it back.
96 was it the first Grand Prix here, or 97? Either way, whatever. One of those things. And I think it was in one of those years, I only read the stat very recently, that it was 401,000 people came to the Oz Grand Prix in Melbourne in the first weekend.
Yeah.
And last year there was about 413,000. So imagine like that kind of peak level of interest in the mid-90s to then for it to drop off and then only really come back in excitement levels again last year.
Well, it's funny. They said on the Adelaide 500 this weekend, V8 Supercars, I was talking about the last F1 race that was in Adelaide. Still to this day, the biggest single-day sporting event attendance record in the history of Australian sport, which was 225,000 or something. So, I mean, it runs deep here. It's one of those sports. It's got a hell of a lot of fans, but there's not big communities like it is at like footy. You can go to the footy 20 times a year. This you can only do it once, and a lot of people that really get into it and post the Netflix documentary on our sport. It's taken a whole new level to the general, the general punter out there that watches. So.
We got together, started talking about Formula One a little bit. It's because of the ad that I can no longer find. Thank God.
That's not bad.
Well, what I will do, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but there is some of the worst hateful comments about my acting ability ever known to man on this video. And I made the mistake, I think it's probably 50-50. 50% of people were like, this is so cool, how good. The other half are like, who is this dickhead? And how did he get on? Yeah. The answer is, if you have an agent, you get offered all kinds of stuff. I had to pretend like I didn't know who David Coulthard was, which, as someone who's loved Formula One for a long time, very difficult, it would seem. But we started talking about Formula One, and one of the things that we sort of said is we weren't best mates, we were friends, but you couldn't really find other people within one friendship group to talk about Formula One with, could you?
Nope. Everyone would ask me, how's Formula One going? And I'd just want to shit talk for 45 minutes, and they'd be like, come on, Campy.
Instead, now you've got a microphone, you do it for 45 minutes here.
Let's move on, my man. Let's move on. Yeah. So, yeah, we chatted about it for probably 2 years every time we saw each other.
We did, yep.
And I was like, let's do a podcast, and
yeah,
you were like, yeah, that could be cool. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't talk properly. I use the English language.
You've gotten a lot better though.
Oh, we have. Yeah, you got to put some effort in and improve. But yeah.
I very recently, listener, opened up our entire back catalogue again. So you can go right back to our 2019 Australian Grand Prix review. I don't know why you would, but if you want a bit of a laugh, to listen to how far we have come as podcasters and as people and presenters.
I wasn't even in the country for that race.
No, you weren't. You
No,
were in the States.
I was.
Oh, it must have been the preview episode we did.
Yeah.
I was living in Frankston.
That's right.
Of all places. I didn't live in Frankston very long, but I lived in Frankston, and in our front living room, you, me, and Michael Best, who helped us out there. We had really good quality sound gear. We had SM7Bs, 2 of those. You know, he edited it really well. And one of the things that we
Good
wanted...
whiskey too.
Great whiskey and beers. And what we really wanted was quality audio, wasn't it, whilst we figured it out? And one of the things that you probably will have noticed is that I spend a lot of time, probably longer than I need to, editing things together to make them sound as good as possible, given the circumstances.
Nothing worse than putting on a podcast and hearing shit audio. It's like, get me out of here.
Doesn't matter if
I'm
it's
off.
a Danny Rick interview, I'm not listening to it because I just cannot stand it.
No, you're right. It's not that hard to put in some effort.
So what was one of the things for you wanting to start the podcast? What was in your mind for why you wanted to do it?
No idea.
No
idea.
Insightful comments.
No idea.
Okay, well, how about this? What were you expecting from doing the podcast?
Absolutely nothing.
Still no.
Absolutely nothing. I remember after the second year, I was like, damn, we've got like 3,000 downloads. How good's that?
Yeah. No, I think we had August 2020, we reached 10,000 downloads.
Yeah, which was like, sorry, the first year was 3,000.
Yeah.
And I thought, geez, there's 3,000 people out there that have, you know, listened to us talk absolute bollocks. I was genuinely shocked, but it sort of took on a world of its own, really. I think end of the second year, it was up into the 30,000s, and I don't even know where we're up to now. But yeah, look, no real goal, which is not good when you go into things like this, because you need to set yourself, as you would know, some targets and some goals, things to work towards. But I really had no idea of the internet world and what podcasts generally looked like. I mean, I look at some of the numbers on these things, and we're still, you know, potato fries compared to some of the big people out there. But it blows me away the amount of people that interact on the internet. And you guys know I don't do social media. I couldn't care less about it, and it's not a part of what I am. But it's been a good learning curve for me to sort of get my head into it a bit. But yeah, there's only upwards and onwards and upwards from here.
We're going into our 5th year of doing this.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. We were lucky enough to catch up with Tommy T last night. He actually responded to a text message. So the 3 of us had some beers, and we sort of reflected a little bit on where we've come and what we're doing next year. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, we've got some exciting news to share with you guys about that. But what has been the hardest thing for you in this process?
Talking.
You knew the answer to that question.
Yeah, look, I've got some like severely bad like sinus, breathing, head structure issues, as you can tell.
Head structure?
Shit head. I say it all the time. Even my missus said it to me the other day. She's like, you need to sort your shit head out, Campy. So anyway, so for me, like, I was probably a man of few words, really. Didn't say much, sort of kept to myself a bit. But yeah, I really struggled. I didn't realise how bad I was, like stringing a sentence together to sound somewhat intelligent. And it's probably a skill I've never really had to learn and to articulate and talk about things. It's funny when you're talking about work stuff. Communication's fine because you know what you're doing. You know the process. You're trying to teach people, but you're also trying to roll out jobs and building. That stuff's fine because I knew it. To actually sit down and figure out how to string a sentence together and talk for 3 or 4 minutes at a time, it's difficult. But yeah, it's been a good skill to learn. I think I've cleaned up a bit of the breathing this year. I don't think it's been anywhere near as bad as what it used to be. So
my technique helps.
Yeah,
But you've worked hard on a lot of that stuff.
Behind closed doors, I did the whole put marbles in your mouth in a bag and yell and scream just to get the muscles activated to be able to project your voice as well. So yeah, I think as a little professional development thing for me, it's been an interesting story and something that I've really enjoyed doing as well. So, yeah, it's probably the biggest struggle, and put myself out there. I don't want to be front and center on anything.
Too late.
My whole outlook is, hey, I'm that guy that's always there and consistent, but just put me behind 3 or 4 people and I'm super happy. So, yeah, put myself out there, especially on the internet. I'm not sure that I'm super comfortable with it. Not that anyone really listens or watches anymore anyway, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Look, I think one of the interesting things is we have grown in popularity. We started before Drive to Survive but we didn't even know of its existence when we started the podcast, even as an idea. So it's been interesting to watch our audience sort of grow and change and do a whole bunch of different things. So the whole point was we wanted to fill a gap in the Australian market. We knew that there were other podcasts like Box of Neutrals who had been doing it for years.
Great.
Love those guys. Really, really awesome content. And hopefully we're going to do this versus a competition, at least go-karts, but maybe some other stuff early next year with them, because they're not competition as in like from a podcast point of view. We're trying to grow an Australian community, and that was the point, is that we wanted to grow an Australian community. But through doing that, we've managed to find Canadians, Americans, people in the UK and the Cayman Islands. The Freya, who's part of the show, was a fan.
Yeah,
listening in Cayman Islands before joining, and I think the evolution of the show has been pretty significant. But one of the things that and as I said before, like, you have done so much work to better yourself, and I know listeners, I mean, we talk about heavy breathing and everything else, but as much as that's a little bit of a shit take on you, and we love it.
Hey, I'm the first to poke.
It's a great hashtag. I want
people.
Hashtag heavy breathing on a t-shirt for next year. I mean, you're a big part of Lakeside Drive, and certainly when you're not around, it's noticed the sort of gap that you leave. And you've worked really hard. And I just want to call that out, because we have done this up until this point, even with our Nord VPN sponsorship, and they've supported this episode as well. We'll get to them in a little bit. But even with that isn't coming to us. Just to let you guys know, we're all doing this for the passion of it. And it's never been in our back of our minds to try and turn this into any like kind of cash grab or anything else. There are a lot of podcasts out there who are like, immediately sponsorship, let's try and get cash. We want to do this to be like, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be a content creator. And the amount of questions I get for like, how do I be a YouTuber and make money? Like, you have no idea. I can't even get us to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
I do that 5 days a week running a business. So I'm not interested in doing it for stuff like this, because this is a hobby and it's good fun, right?
It's great. And, we are doing it for you. And that's the thing, is for the listener, this is a community-focused podcast. So, Campy, over the last couple of years, what's been your favourite moment to record?
In your old office was pretty good.
Yes.
The first couple of years where we had no idea. The 20 minutes when we were setting up before the podcast was like we were giddy school children on school camp, I remember all sleeping in the same room together. And the amount of bollocks that was said between the three of us, stuff you just could not put on radio. It's called locker room talk, according to Mr. Trump. That's what it is.
Is it?
Boys will be boys when they get together. Specific moments. I remember watching the race live with that Grosjean crash. That we were together when we were watching that, and it was horrific. Do you want me to keep going? Yeah, not that. That was memorable because it was like, shit, we're watching something pretty crazy here, and we were all in the same room. So that was a memorable experience. But I think it's laughter. That's if I consider me, you and Tommy getting together and doing things. It's not specific moments, but it's laughter, and it's just the constant piss taking, the constant jabbing each other, which is enjoy. You get married, you grow up, you can't do those things every day, and the one memory would be the laughter. So
it's certainly been one of those things that, from a enjoyment point of view, being in person is much better. And look, it was a difficult. I'm not sure. Well, this episode is about you, but it's about also the podcast as well. In 2020, so
I'll deflect as much as I possibly can.
I know you can, and will. I moved up to Jervis Bay, the New South Wales South Coast.
That's right. Yeah.
Just before COVID hit. In fact, I drove down to the Oz Grand Prix on the Friday.
That's right.
Just when they cancelled it. I was driving past Albury Wodonga. So I was like, cool, thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're on our way in, yeah.
Still ended up going to a Darkness concert, best band in the world. They were like, what's COVID? With 800 of my closest friends at the Forum, and that was a kick-ass gig. Little did we know that would be the last gig that anything would sort of happen for a while. But yeah, I went away and we weren't really sure how things were going to go. And I think it's interesting, like that late 2019 period, as you said, in my office in Somerville, we'd get together. It was easy. We didn't do a hell of a lot of editing because we didn't really know what we were doing, but it's kind of progressed into this point now. And we have a significant amount of downloads. I mean, 20 people is a lot, right? Like, and I try to remind people of this. When you think about people who are, if you've subscribed to the podcast, if you're brand new, if you've been doing it for 3 years or 4 years, you have listened, A, to a lot of nonsense, B, to a lot of progressions of what we've been trying to do with the show, including this year, like the latter part of the year, I kicked my shouty introductions out the window and we did a cold open just to try something different. But always it's about trying to create the best possible content for you guys. Like it's always, how do I create the best podcast? How do I create the best podcast? But doing that remote stuff, that really sucked. Like even if we were all living here, we couldn't do it in person anyway. But it was sucked. But we found a bit of a rhythm. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually reached out to Rusty, to say,
I still remember his review of me.
Yeah. I won't read it out. I won't do it that bad.
He gave me just absolute shit.
He appreciated your opinions. I just think it was the mic technique he thought was a little wanting. But it's interesting because, at that point, again, it wasn't a hell of a lot of podcasts going around. And I was still in the mind of trying to get it as good as we could get it. And in fact, we took all of his feedback. We changed the podcast.
Yeah.
Of course, you may or may not remember, we used to be called Oz F1, and some really good friends of the show helped us decide that maybe not having F1 in the title, if we got bigger, was a good thing.
Pushed in the right direction. Hey, if you don't do this, there will be some ramifications.
Yeah, which we weren't big enough at that point to really sort of go, it's bad for brand awareness. But look, we Tommy T, shout out to him for the idea of the name Lakeside Drive, because it's like a band, like a rock. In fact, I think there is a rock band. If you go onto Instagram, I think just at Lakeside Drive is a rock band from Canada.
Really?
Yep. And of course, it's the main road going around the Grand Prix circuit on the lake.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, called Lakeside Drive. So that's been good.
That's the Melbourne track, by the way.
Yes, we've really enjoyed that side of things. So that your best parts, and what's been the hardest part for you in the last 12 months? Because it's been a big season, and I know a lot of us are tired. People could tell by the end of it that we're all tired.
Yeah. Oh, look, hard's not the right word. At the start of this year, I had crazy life happenings, got married and stuff going on, and the last month where I've been around just absolute chaos, just work-wise and stuff. And yeah, so that was difficult. So it was difficult to get into it. I wouldn't say it's hard, but seriously, the talking thing's the biggest. The talking thing was like, I'd lose sleep over putting together like a 3-minute rant. I was like, far out, So yeah, that's probably been the hardest, but probably the most satisfying part too. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
How's it?
And you got to adapt and change as well. You can't stay the way that we were when we first started.
Oh, no way. No one would listen.
The world's changed, and there's still a big part of me that's like that wants to play a role and say all the stupid, funny shit. But, a lot of that stuff's under the water now, and you got to stay relevant with the times, I suppose, which there's a part of me that hates it, but there's a part of me that gets it too. So
I think it's interesting because as we've grown, we've of course found new audiences.
Yeah.
And again, what started realistically probably as a thought for a community of people living in Melbourne. We were kind of like, we could get together and like go to pubs and, watch a race or whatever else, has turned into this international madness, really. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was the Oz Grand Prix this year.
Yeah.
And we had drinks afterwards. We met some pretty amazing people. How's it been for you to know, and this is just the reality, that you've gone from, talking nonsense in a Frankston living room to now being listened to not only across the country or across the state, let alone across the country, and then internationally, and having people come and join us for some beers who are like, it's Campy.
Yeah, it was a bit odd. Someone tapped me on the shoulder like, Campy, how are you, mate? And I was like, wow. I played music and played in bands, so I've experienced a tiny bit of that stuff as well. But it's definitely, I mean, look,
there's a level of fame, is what I'm saying.
Fuck, it's not fame.
It is.
It's not. They're not.
It's better than being infamous, I suppose. Being famous.
They call them fans, but they're listeners at the end of the day. And mate, you don't want to put yourself on a pedestal like that. But it's nice to get some recognition too when you go, I don't lap it up. I'm probably as outgoing and as boisterous as I am on the podcast at any other point.
True story.
When I'm at a pub, I'm just, hey, let's sit back and just relax and sit back and be that fourth or fifth person in the crowd. So, I am acting to a certain level, but enough about me, Jim. Far out.
Well, this is a podcast about you. Or chat with Campy. Campy's couch chat is what I'm going to call it, because we need some positive alliteration for the podcast name. Well, look, call it what you want, but people do listen. People are interested.
Yeah.
And a shout out to the couple of you who Freya and I caught up with in Miami. That was phenomenal. And I talked to quite a few of you regularly on Instagram through either the Lakeside Drive Instagram or my personal Instagram account too. It's great. And again, we are not above you guys at all. We are the same. We are only trying to create a community, which is an interesting thing.
We all go to the bathroom and we all shit. We all wipe our own backside. But
when did it become hard for you to watch Formula One in the last 2 years?
Oh, geez.
Can you sort of pick the moment, or was it a slow progression?
I think.
And why?
First 3 races this year, McLaren were nowhere. Sorry, the first 2 races they were nowhere. And I think Lando podiumed in
Imola.
No, this year in Saudi Arabia somewhere in the Middle East. Anyway, and Danny Rick had a few issues early on, and he missed testing for COVID, and I just had that feeling in my gut like this isn't going to go the way we want it to go. And I tried to do everything I could to put a positive tinge on Danny Rick's performances early on, because mate, we're invested in him. It's not like we give a shit if we get him on the podcast and you'd fanboy him, but like that's the reason that he's the reason that we love the sport so much, and that's something to listen to and to watch every week, and that's our guy, right? That's our team. So it has been hard because there's not really another character on the grid that I, would like to succeed so much more. So, it gets in, you can get cynical really quickly, and I'm shocking at it. And, I'm the first to, take the piss out of somebody else and, hold them to account when, the Gasly thing. I really don't care about the guy, if I'm honest. But do you know what? Like, I really couldn't care less, but it's something that started and you just go on with it, right? So, it's, look, early on too, and I had I was getting married and some stuff going on earlier in the year, so I missed a couple of the races. I don't even think I watched the 3 races I missed just because life was hectic. So, yeah, this year's probably been the toughest year, and I've probably seen that, and I think the listeners too. And like when your other sporting teams, like whether it be the Bombers or when the All Blacks got done by the Irish this year, it's like, what am I watching sport for? Why am I putting myself through this every week? And you lose interest in it. So it's been a tougher year, but I still love the sport. I still love the technical side of it. People ask, how do I learn more about it? Just go and download the FIA regulations. And
it's also a good way to put you to sleep.
Yeah, but if like I've got a bit of an inquisitive mind like that. I like to know how stuff works, and whether it's pulling apart a drill and figuring out how the battery turns the rotors through the brushes to generate voltage and that stuff for me is like, I love that stuff. But that's not something you share with everybody else, and I think that's part of the sport too. And the more you watch them and the more you get into it and you follow like the drivers and you get into the politics of the sport and who's really pulling the strings, it's Ferrari and the FIA director. And once you start to understand it and you get more out of the sport on the weekend. So you can watch practice 1 and 2 and you know what they're talking about all the time. And there's great discussion and commentary around the saga of the day and, you know, what's happening with the winglets and what's happening, you know, aerodynamically. And there's some really good stuff. So the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And, that's the stuff that really gets me.
It has been difficult though because of Danny Rick. And when we started the podcast, it was, you know, Australia, I think Aussie banter, big opinions and huge Daniel Ricciardo bias.
Well, just gone to Renault too, so.
Yeah, and it was hard enough to watch him leave Red Bull. And especially his first, because we were there, Tommy, you were away, you were in Texas. Tommy T and I where were we? Turns 9 and 10, 2019, and we were watching. This is back when the turn actually existed, rather than the really fast follow through now.
That was Bottas 2.0, right?
Oh, massive screen, VB on fire, opening, bloody lights go out, and then Danny Rick front wing rips off.
That's right. Hit that.
He's limping around the circuit. Everyone's like. Anyway, he started at the bottom for Renault and he really made himself sort of up to the top. And his couple of performances in 2020 were phenomenal in that car.
Oh, he drove the arse off that car. Even the first year, he made Hulkenberg look second rate. Although he didn't get the performance out of the car that he probably wanted. That second year and hit that Renault, that was. Geez.
But he was figuring it out, right? And you can see what didn't happen in McLaren happened at Renault. He was figuring it out as a completely different philosophy there. Brakes are different, driving, steering is different, everything else. Once he got it, okay. And you look back at the highlights of the end of 2019 and 2020, and it's like a Ferrari or Seb Vettel overtaking Danny Rick in a Renault for like third.
Yeah.
People forget.
Yeah.
He had that Renault had absolutely no place being where it did. With the Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari domination. Yeah, okay, Ferrari had a good year in 2019. Ferrari with that power unit that was now illegal.
Cheating, yeah.
The fact that Renault was doing what they were doing. So anyway, but it's been hard. And one of the things that I know a lot of you have as well, we like to think this is a Danny Rick safe space, is that when there was rumours happening about DR being replaced, firstly it was with the IndyCar drivers from McLaren.
That's right, yeah.
So Pato O'Ward, by all accounts, lovely dude.
Sure he is.
He's
not our boy, is he?
No, and that's right. And then it sort of was like, why would they do that? I mean, there's now 400 drivers who drive for McLaren, but it's interesting sort of seeing that and then seeing the energy shift in Australia, because we were, like you and I got back into F1 or into F1 properly as sort of adults, inverted commas, sort of 18, 19, 20 because of Mark Webber, seeing the same thing happen for Danny Rick fans. So if you're early 20s now, you're Danny Rick fan because you came into the sport. If it was 2019 or Drive to Survive was your entry, or slightly before that, 17, 18, amazing performances in that Red Bull. Even 14. Do you think back to 2014?
14 was his first year in a good car.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking like, I look at some of the younger guys coming through, like Leclerc's had his shot, Sainz has had his shot, Russell's had his shot, Norris to an extent has had his shot. When Danny Rick first got his shot, he was qualifying on the front row and winning races against a 4-time world champion and against a Mercedes turbo hybrid that was so dominant. But Danny Rick, he's the one that when he got his shot, he performed so much better than everybody else. And everyone's like, this is a future world champion. Then Max Verstappen came along, halfway through 4 races into 2016, and it was a that's the progression we've been on. But that's how good this Danny Rick came into that top seat. The one hit on him was, they don't know if he's got any racecraft, at the front end. And we soon learned that within one race how good it was. So
his progression, and like we are as a podcast emotionally attached to the guy. There's no denying that whatsoever. And I think we've sort of ridden the highs and lows with him this year. And one of the reasons why I think some of our listeners haven't maybe followed on or kept up with our race reviews. Hopefully you're back for this chat.
Fair enough too.
Absolutely fair enough. It's hard to watch. when it gets to the point where the camera for the opening lap has moved to follow the first 10 or 13 cars around and you can't see Daniel in that shot, that's where it was for me. Like, okay, this really sucks a lot. It's really struggling to watch it. Yeah. But
I think we've talked about it before as well. Formula One has got, with every fan, has got a 4 to 5 year bell curve on your viewership. You dabble in it for the first year, you get really passionate about it. The second year is you are watching absolutely and consuming everything you can. The third year, you're still right into it and you're doing everything, but by the tail end of that third season, you start to drift off. By season 5, it's like, history repeats itself all the time in this sport, and it'll be interesting to see what the viewership and the fans of general, the what I would call the Netflixification of our support, those fans. It'll be interesting to see where they are now with 4 or 5 seasons of the sport and whether they hold on to it and, watch it as passionately as they have had for the last 4 or 5 years. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's also very hard to watch it passionately in this country. And it is, to our overseas listeners, well done you for being overseas just generally, because getting up, either staying up till 11 o'clock and watching, inevitably there's a red flag because FIA is trigger happy a little bit more now with those than what they used to be, the stewards. It just means that you're wrapping up a race at 1 o'clock, 1:30. Maybe you want to watch a little bit of the post show. So realistically, you're probably asleep at 2 on a Sunday night. A lot of our listeners are, you work great jobs, you do all the things, you're traveling early Monday morning. That's maybe like 4 hours sleep.
Majority of the population's up at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it is so difficult to lean into it. And one of the things that I really want to do for next year for this podcast is have more interviews and have more people that want to actually hang out and do really cool things to chat with them so that we've got some content that's outside of just race reviews.
Freya's chat with the Irish chick. What was her name?
Emily.
Oh, we'll get Emily on the podcast. She's excellent.
Here's a hot tip for you. Here's a little bit of up and coming. There is an episode this Friday, but also Freya next week is chatting with Laura Winter. So, Freya and I interviewed Laura for the Extreme E podcast a couple of months ago. She is bloody delightful.
Yeah.
Incredibly professional, exceptionally hardworking. She works across rugby, Formula One. Yeah. She's done World Rallycross, cycling. I think she still wants to do darts, a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, it is just a ridiculous amount of content that she's got in her head all the time. Extreme E, of course, as well. Anyway, that's going to be a really cool chat. So make sure you subscribe to be able to hear that. But the stories that she's been able to find through fans and, of course, or listens to the show, of which she has been as well, and fans of the sport, everyone's got an interesting story to tell.
Oh, people are the most interesting thing in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's got value and everyone's got a story, right? And when you actually sit down and you talk to people and keep it Formula One focused for our podcast, but just in general, people are, there's some pretty awesome people out there that live some bloody interesting lives
100%.
To the monotony, the word I'm trying to use.
Yes, monotony,
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So next year we'll get more.
And many of them are you.
Yeah.
You guys have much more interesting stories than us. Two idiots.
Oh, we got Manus on.
Who?
Yeah, I know. cracking.
He's not going to listen to this.
He's a cracking human being.
He is very good.
And then Mark Kay too, genuine contributor to everything that we do. And it's good to have him along as well. Pay driver.
Did you enjoy that bit of the last podcast? Yeah.
That's good. So there'll be more of that next year as well.
Let's just take this moment to talk about our sponsor very quickly about this episode. Hey. And we'll be to the end of this season. We're very grateful for NordVPN and Emilio for reaching out from on behalf of them to say, hey, we really like your content. Are you interested in using, or dealing with us for a sponsorship agreement, because I can tell you, and Campy knows, we've had stacks of people go, oh, you're doing good content. Can we sponsor you? And we've been like, no, you are not relevant to our audience.
Leave me alone.
We do not want Manscaped ads. Like, it's just not going to happen. I know a lot of you don't want us to have Manscaped ads too. But NordVPN has been...
Aldi ads.
Or Aldi ads. Or Liquorland ads. Anyway, boxing neutrals. But... it's been really good to have these guys, and we really appreciate not only them sponsoring us, but you guys jumping on and subscribing with a NordVPN subscription to help support us too. You can do that, and of course, it's all a trackable link and everything else. If you go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive, you'll get a 2-year heavily discounted rate, and you get 4 months free, which is great. It's 30 days money back guarantee, so if you don't like it, you can just get rid of it and move on to something else.
Cracking product.
It's genuinely the easiest VPN to use.
I'm the most computer illiterate man in the world, but I know you need a VPN because I've said it before, but these tech companies, these dodgy bastards out there, I don't want them seeing anything. It's bad enough that they've probably got a bloody something in me TV and it's listening to me a microphone and a camera, which is not good. So least I can do on my laptop and devices is use the VPN so that I can, get good free stuff from around the world too. Good
free stuff. You can unlock all kinds of regional content if you want to watch. For example, I'm watching Shetland, the television show at the moment. It's a Scottish detective show. Bloody love it. It is phenomenal. Love that show. Good. But season 7, for whatever reason, isn't on ABC, which is free to get here. It's behind a paywall or one of the subscription services. So I've just changed my location to the UK and suddenly I'm able to watch the rest of season 7, which has been super, super helpful because I don't know about you guys, but I dislike subscribing to so many different services. Trying is it on KO? Is it on Netflix? Is it on Binge? Is it on bloody Stan, Disney Plus, Netflix? Tommy and I were having this conversation yesterday. Sometimes it's difficult to cancel a subscription, but if you're not interested in doing that, or if you're like me a lot for this year and you're traveling a lot, if you've found something that you want to watch, you can continue to watch it. You can keep your region in that country because a lot of the time I'll fly back from London to here and then I can't watch half the stuff anymore because it doesn't exist.
Easy too. Easy.
Super easy.
If I can use it, anyone can use it.
So with that, if you want to support the show and you want to protect yourself online, make sure you go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive and grab a subscription for that. Thank you to them for sponsoring this episode. Campy, 2023. So it's been really hard for Danny Rick. It's been a hard couple of months for us. I'm glad you've been able to be a great husband, support your wife with what she's been doing, and of course that whole season of what's been going on with her.
Yeah,
we wrapped up the season without you, so we looked at Abu Dhabi, which you didn't really miss a lot. Brazil didn't really miss a lot, and
great track. Brazil.
What we will do though is a proper season review of 2022 in a couple of weeks. But just get your thoughts on. What are you hoping 2023 will be not only from a Formula One fan point of view, from an Australian F1 fan point of view, and also a podcast point of view?
Podcast point of view, it's going to be awesome. We've got heaps of stuff in the pipeline coming through, which it's just good. You need to keep this fresh. It's been a bit stale. The sport's a bit stale. So I think it'd be good to start new for the podcast. For an Australian, for me, I think I'm not as excited about Oscar Piastri as I am Danny Rick, and I'm hoping that'll come.
Why do you think that is?
Probably age. We're not, it was 12 years ago Danny Rick debuted. I was 20 years old and still on the beers, 6 nights a week. So young champion I was. So I think age gets a bit of it in the way too. But I hope I get excited about Piastri because he is genuinely the best talent we've seen come into this sport probably since, let's go with Charles Leclerc, and he can drive the wheels off anything and prove that, and he's just so good on the car.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that outright
He's not a character.
Pace that, like a Verstappen has.
Yeah.
But he's just got this 98, 99% solid consistency that he can do all day, and I think it'll win him a world championship. So So championships have been slim pickings for us in Aussie motorsport for a while. So,
but just out of reach, it feels like you kind of get a good momentum towards it, and then something happens, regulations change, or new drivers come up.
And for the sport, I hope we get a genuine battle between two constructors next year. I think it'll probably be Mercedes, Red Bull. I think for Mercedes to drop off this year, I think it was expected at some stage they would. Can't stay on that top perch forever. But before the halfway break this year, they had some cracking results, and after the break had some really good results too. But Lewis had an odd year; he didn't win a race this year, which is the first time ever. I'd be expecting Mercedes to bounce back, and I think that's what the sport needs. It needs a genuine competition, like probably what we saw in 2021. Without the ending that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great season.
But you think about like 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, like there was a lot of competition for that top step.
Yeah. I mean, Red Bull throughout those years, well, from 2010 to 13, clearly the most dominant car on the grid.
But there was still the
didn't win every race.
And there was still that tension between Seb and Mark.
Yep.
And I feel like we just haven't had that. It was as much as Valtteri 2.0 in 2019 was great, he just didn't do enough.
And those guys were so much closer too.
Yeah, that's right.
The top 8 cars were in a procession. They were literally following within half a second of each other, not being able to pass, frustrating without DRS and things. But the genuine pace of the teammate compared to the number one driver of that era was not like what we see now. We see some big gaps and some big differences, and I think the sport needs it. I think it needs it. We've touched on this a couple of times this year. It's just not. I'm still not sure where F1 goes. It's got a bit of an identity crisis. It's in our conversations from a corporate level. They're clearly the reason we're doing more races is to make it more commercially viable for the Middle Eastern money to come in and snap it up, like they have with a hell of a lot of other sports. They've got the golf going on at the moment. They own the majority of the biggest soccer, football franchises around the world. In America, they're trying to take over their sporting teams as well, and F1's just another thing on the list. So that identity, I think, will probably, from a corporate level, I think the sport's in a good place because they're selling more and they're making more. But I think it takes a negative impact on the actual racing side of our sport and what we watch it for. And I think if they sell to a Middle Eastern conglomerate, I think it'd leave a sour taste in a lot of fans' mouths just because of the inconsistencies and the bullshit that goes with racing on over there. We can fucking whinge and moan about how bad Russia and China are at things sometimes, but there's a whole region of shit that comes in when it comes to the Middle East that just no one wants to talk about, which I don't like as well. So, sorry, the wife's ringing me. So it'll be interesting to see where the sport goes. And I still think that we've got a bit of an identity crisis because I don't think we're going to go electric. Biofuels, who cares about biofuels? If the world's going to go to hydrogen, sweet. Make the transition into Formula One too. We've proved that we can drive on 100 litres of full Grand Prix. Why do we need to continue down this electric hybrid mode when, the fans are sick of it? We want loud noises back, don't we? We want 16,000 RPM V10s back.
There's a podcast in that, although it's already been taken by the race. Look, I think it's all interesting to figure out or to see what Dominicali is going to do with the direction of F1 itself, how the FIA then look at everything else.
Got that Mohammed Ben whatever his name is.
But he comes from a rally background, so he's not a circuit racer.
Yeah,
he's not like Jean Todt, who are and Ferrari just own everything. They own Formula One, they own the FIA. In this instance, they don't.
Yeah,
and so
Matteo Binotto will be running the show in the next decade.
Well, there you go. That's true. They need to look for a new one. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen. I think I'm not yet sure how I feel about the Las Vegas race. I don't, to be honest. The Miami race is a bit crap. The vibe though around the city, I didn't end up going to the circuit, but the vibe around the city was cool though.
Yeah.
So it brought a lot of people to sort of knowing about Formula One, of course, in the States, it's the biggest growth market for anything when it comes to sport. We've got amazing presenters like Danica Patrick now who have done an amazing job in NASCAR and IndyCar. You know, she's now got a voice which is great to help help more Americans get into the sport as well. So, look, I don't know about Vegas, how I feel about it yet. If I get to go, I think there'll be one thing, so long as someone else is paying for my hotel room because they're already ridiculous, as we've spoken about, and gives me media access because there's no way that I can afford a ticket. But if it sort of like turns into a little bit more of the spectacle and entertainment rather than the sporting thing, it would be interesting to sort of cherry pick the calendar races through the year where you go, well, here's the sporting events and here's the spectacle events.
Oh, I think Vegas will be a spectacle.
Oh, for sure.
It'll be probably the biggest spectacle outside of Monaco, the sports.
But then you look at like Zandvoort, right? So Zandvoort or Monaco, are they spectacles or races?
Zandvoort is still a race, and the fans make that a spectacle.
If you can see it through all the flare smoke.
I love the flares. I love the fact that you can buy flares in Europe and just put them wherever you want. Mate, we got to get freaking. We got to have licenses to have them. You got to log them on a registrar, and if they've been let off before you go to buy a new one.
Someone who has thrown a
nanny state.
Someone who's thrown a smoke canister. Can I just say they smell disgusting? You're not missing anything, and you get covered in whatever shit color. You throw something, and you're like, why is this smoke purple?
But yeah, Zandvoort is like the fans make that. The Dutchies are the far out. They're a good crowd.
Be interesting to do. Look, we'll see what happens next year.
Vegas is different again because Vegas is like, it's a cool place to go and the place is always happening, but Vegas is like a town that's set up for those sort of things.
Absolutely.
And I think it's probably the biggest event that's ever going to go to Vegas that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it'll be a spectacle. Whether we need to go there every year, well, I don't think we need to. We've talked about that before. So I'd biannually, yes, but not every year.
Before we wrap this one up, I want to circle back to Oscar Piastri because it's been an interesting time. I said this on, if you need to call your wife, mate, please do or message her back. I said this on Instagram a couple of weeks ago that I'm sort of done with holding McLaren to account for Danny Rick's performance. Think what you want. If you think Danny Rick is washed, I mean, you're incorrect, but it's fine. I don't think he is. We know his performances have been there and what he wants from a type of car to drive. Let's not forget, as he said many times the last couple of weeks in interviews, that he outqualified Lando in 2021 in Bahrain. First race, car outqualified Lando, who's been driving that car for a couple of years. So I think you can go listen to those podcasts, the Oz Grand Prix podcast with Lamo and Mr. Clayton, and then the official F1 Beyond the Grid podcast as well. You can listen to those. And he was very real in those interviews, which I think is interesting and totally different. He sounds a lot more relaxed. But one of the things that I've said is we sort of got to move on from that. We got to, and I said this on the last podcast as well, we got to try and get excited about Oscar Piastri. And I think one of the things, Campy, that we suffered from here in Australia is a bit of a clickbait reporting from like news.com and even Fox Sports if Lamo wasn't writing the articles about, Oscar Piastri has pushed Daniel Ricciardo out of the sport with the help of Mark Webber. And I think it was really sad for Oscar because he comes in under this cloud of not having full and total Australian support as if he would have done if he went to Alpine. Yeah. Now, Alpine since have shown their hand about how useless they have been in terms of organising drivers and managing those kinds of situations. But him going to McLaren and trying to get excited about it, it's hard. But I feel like we owe it to him to be able to do it.
Yeah, totally.
Especially as a Melbourne boy. I mean, Danny Rick's not even from the correct part of the country.
From the Republic of Western Australia. Far out. I hate Liberals over there too. So
if they've got any left, I think they've got less of them in their parliament there than we do here.
Anyway, look, we will get excited about Oscar.
We're going to try and get him on the podcast. That's part of the thing for next year is we're going to try and get a chat, hopefully around the Oz Grand Prix weekend.
He's a young kid. Hey, we're watching this kid's dreams play out, everything he's worked on.
How good is that?
And he is like, I mean, we talk about, the 1% of the 1%, but, add another 1% onto that, and that's what Formula One drivers are.
Yeah,
and
totally.
For a young kid like Oscar to get through and to achieve what he's achieved thus far is, mate, we're just watching his dreams,
And he's not a pay driver either. He's there purely on merit.
And done it the way you should do it too,
Yep.
Which is good. You know, I mean, well, I've spoken about before, you know, part of what I love doing about the podcast too is participating in other people's dreams and the ambitions that they have. Not that I necessarily have the same ambitions or want the same things out of it, but it's awesome to do those, you know, to participate in other people's dreams. And, you know, we're doing that with Oscar too. This is his dream, and we get to watch it and not so much be a part of it, you know, in the inner sanctum and the circle, but because we love the sport, we get to participate in that as well. That's probably, you know, that's the direction or the lens I'm going to look through Oscar Piastri next year, and let's just get on the ride with him and have as good a time as we can, because, I mean, it's easy to get cynical in this sport, as I said, so let's keep it positive. After 300 races next year, you can hold me to account for that. But, yeah, it's good. What about, can we touch on Bonotto?
Let's save Bonotto, I reckon,
Cool.
for our season review podcast. I actually think that's a good place to end. Very well said, Campy. Would you like to see us out for the podcast?
Well, I'm stoked that this podcast was about me and we didn't do much talking about me. That's
classic.
Just the way I wanted it. But I've had a cracking year. Thanks for you guys' support in all that we do, whether you're a casual fan or a patron. Very much appreciative of you being part of that community. Continue to be part of the community as well. The more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And next year we will grow and we'll have a lot more opportunity to do stuff with you guys, you know, in the flesh or getting on podcasts and stuff. So yeah, the more you participate, the more you get out of it. And we've had a cracking ride thus far, and it's probably just the start, really. So it's been a good year. It's been a tough year. It's been emotional and shitty at times, but as a sport, I think we're on the up, and we'll stay positive, and it's going to be a good time. So thanks for listening.
See you next time. I occasionally watch children's television when I'm in the UK and I'm hanging out with like my nephews and nieces, right?
Yeah.
Things like when we were growing up, when we were like younger, like Fireman Sam, Postman Pat, or like the stop motion animation. No, they all look super weird now, dude. It's like Gumtree or Craigslist version of Postman Pat. It's like, oh, we found a way to make it cheaper, so we did. It's like, yeah, but now it's like a horror movie. It's terrifying to the children.
What did they used to call it? Like the clay, was it?
Yeah, the stop motion clay stuff.
Yeah,
that used to be a vibe.
I love the Scottish overdubs people do of those things on YouTube. The greatest Postman Pat clip I've ever seen in my life.
We'll link it somewhere. You find it for me. You put it. And we can all have a little investigation into the mind of Campy.